Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. Welcome to Rush Generation's annual Holiday Highs and Lows lecture. As always, Rush Generations is delighted to be your source of information, resources, and health promotion programs that help maximize your well-being and good health as you age. Today is December 20th, 2023, and my name is Kim Morley, and I am a Rush Generations program coordinator. I will be your moderator for today's lecture, and will also be presenting along with an esteemed colleague, Stephanie Clark, from Rush's Road Home program. This annual lecture is particularly significant as we often encounter various stresses and challenges around the holidays and may not know how to best equip ourselves to get through these challenges. And before I introduce Stephanie and myself, I'd like to first thank Hannah Weitzman for helping with the production of this lecture and all of the behind the scenes. Hannah does such an amazing job with our lectures, and this year in particular, to help them run smoothly, and we just want to express appreciation for all of her hard work. As she normally does, Hannah will be helping us manage the chat and other key aspects so that we can have a great discussion. As you know, we're live streaming this lecture via our YouTube channel, where we have dozens of other health education lectures that you can always refer back to or send to friends, family members, colleagues that could also benefit from the valuable information that our speakers offer every other week. We use the video platform Zoom, which also allows us to host a good number of people who join us via the telephone. For those of you on YouTube, we ask that you please use the chat function to ask your questions or to add to the discussion throughout the lecture. We will make sure that your comments and questions make it to our presenters. And for those of you listening to the presentation via phone, you will have an opportunity at the end to unmute your audio so that you can ask questions. We're really excited to have you joining us today. And please note, as we always remind you, the information offered here is for general information purposes only. For situations that are specific to you, we encourage you to always seek additional professional advice so that your specific needs are met. Now I'm delighted to introduce you to Stephanie Clark. Stephanie Clark is a licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and a board-certified art therapist. She is currently employed as the senior clinical art therapist for the Road Home program at Rush University Medical Center, providing individual and group art therapy to veterans and their loved ones. Stephanie has practiced art therapy for the past 10 years, using creativity as a tool to help children, families, and veterans heal from trauma. Stephanie is active in the field of art therapy, serving as past president of the Illinois Art Therapy Association, and currently provides art therapy supervision to new professionals seeking credentialing in the field. Stephanie, we are so excited to have you here today. And to begin, I will be sharing some slides on coping with the holidays and just a little bit more background about me. I am a licensed clinical social worker and, as I mentioned before, a program coordinator for Rush Generations and our health promotion and disease prevention team. I've worked at Rush for the past 7 years and have clinical experience working with children and adolescents, as well as adults diagnosed with cancer. I have a strong passion for supporting people through challenging times and transitions in their life. So to get us started, I will begin sharing my screen. Okay, Can everyone see that okay?
It looks great.
Okay, great.
Can you tell us how to see them? Can you tell us?
So we have all heard Bing Crosby wish us days that are merry and bright during the holidays. But what if we just don't feel this way? Although the holidays are a time of joy, laughter, and celebration, it can also be a time of heavy emotions. Whether it's personal struggles, conflicts within our relationships, or unrest in the world, it can be a challenging time to feel merry and bright. The difference between how we should feel and how we actually feel can often worsen the difficulty with coping with these strong emotions. So let's take a look first at some common emotions that can be experienced or even heightened during the holidays. First, we may feel stressed, possibly by finances or having to work through the holidays, or even, what gifts I need to buy for certain people. The American Psychological Association reported that 38% of people surveyed said their stress increased during the holiday season. Next, we may feel grief, as the holidays are usually a time to spend with loved ones, so the sense of someone not being present can feel even greater. Also, we can feel isolated or a sense of loneliness if we're not around our loved ones or friends, family during the holidays. According to a study conducted by the National Association on Mental Illness, said that 68% of people reported feeling lonely during the holidays. That is a staggering number. So what happens in our bodies when these feelings present themselves? Our body has an internal system that controls our heart rate, breathing, vision changes, and more. And this system is activated when we're under stress. This is our built-in stress response, and commonly known as our fight or flight response, and helps our body face stressful situations and prepares us to be ready for some type of action. But when we experience long-term or even chronic stress, this causes continued activation, resulting in wear and tear on our bodies. This can cause our heart rate to beat fast. We can have tightness in our chest, or pain, muscle tension in different parts of our body. We can sometimes even feel like it's difficult for us to breathe. Our appetite may even change, or we might even feel nauseous. And headaches are also common under chronic stress situations. Then these symptoms can also have emotional expression. We can feel more on edge or irritable than we normally do. We may want to withdraw from other people, which might not be kind of our typical personality. We might also experience a sense of dread, that like, oh, I just don't have the motivation to do things. I don't want to be around other people right now, or cook for the holidays, or whatever activities that you would normally do. Our sleep can also be disrupted as well, where we may find that it's difficult to fall asleep or to even stay asleep too. So what are some ways that we can cope when these feelings show up? We'll go through a list here, talking about both physical health as well as emotional health. And you may see things on this list that you are already familiar with, or you practice, or you might find yourself curious about trying something new. So let's go through this list together. A good place to start is taking care of our physical health. This can involve prioritizing sleep by getting a full night's rest based on your body's needs, or even taking a 20 to 30-minute nap in the early afternoon. Eating well is also important. When during this time of the year, we see more cookies around. Also, a lot of party food is offered. So trying to incorporate some parts of healthy eating is beneficial. This would include, whole grains like brown rice, whole wheat bread, and oats, along with our vegetables, green vegetables, leafy vegetables. Those are wonderful, as well as incorporating fruit. And this can help your body feel better, but it can also improve your mood as well. Limiting alcohol consumption, as well as drug use, is important, as that can sometimes be a way that we try and cope with how we're feeling, cope with, stress. But conversely, that can even make some of those symptoms worse. And lastly, engaging in some type of physical activity. The Mayo Clinic said that even 10 to 15 minutes of physical activity, like these examples here, taking a walk, lifting weights, or practicing yoga, can reduce symptoms of depression as well as anxiety. Next is taking care of our emotional health. And here are some of the ways that we can do that. First, we have listed as breathing techniques, massage, mindfulness exercises. I know one of my favorite breathing exercises is what they call box breathing, where if you picture a square box and you'll inhale for 4 seconds, hold that inhale, then exhale for 4 seconds, and hold that exhale. And doing that for several rounds, sometimes up to a minute, if you're able to tolerate that, and then seeing if you notice your body feeling more relaxed. Mindfulness strategies are also really helpful as well, and even places like YouTube have some great resources for that. Engaging in hobbies is another way, or even a new hobby is another way to take care of our emotional health. That could be in the form of reading a book, or some form of art making, or decorating, or just watching your favorite movie around this time of year. Volunteering or doing something charitable can be a positive distraction, and bringing joy to someone else can potentially lessen some of those feelings that we may having that are disruptive for us. Also engaging in spiritual or religious practices like praying or meditating, or attending a service at your place of worship. This can help with reducing stress and increasing a sense of connectedness. Also, allowing space for your emotions. Take time to check in with yourself, even if this is just, 3, maybe even 5 minutes. Give yourself permission to be honest about what is most challenging for you this holiday season. Also, practicing self-compassion. We can often be our own worst critic and can hold ourselves to standards that we wouldn't even hold others to. The creator of acceptance and commitment therapy phrased this as, we need to be our own best friend. And ways to practice self-compassion can be reciting encouraging phrases to ourselves, like, I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough. Or, it's understandable that I feel this way. Also, if we're feeling a sense of grief or loss, honoring those loved ones who aren't present for the holiday celebrations. Sometimes our natural tendency may be to avoid thinking about missing a loved one, but in turn, honoring and celebrating them can also bring a greater sense of joy and reminiscing. And this can be done through preparing a loved one's favorite meal, discussing the stories with other loved ones, listening to music that they like, or even creating new traditions with them in mind. Setting boundaries can prevent burnout or a feeling of overwhelm during the holidays. This might mean deciding to partially attend certain gatherings or even choosing to not attend entirely. And, you know, an example of a way to share this with someone is by saying, thank you for the invitation, and no, I won't be coming this year. Or thank you so much for your concern. However, I will be unable to come over this year. And then lastly is seeking support, and that can be from friends, coworkers, or even professionals. If you're feeling like these symptoms are, you know, more severe than they have been before, or you know, other ways of coping just aren't as effective, please reach out and seek professional help. There are a lot of resources that can be provided for that. And so how do we apply these healthiest strategies to our lives? If you already have a daily practice of the skills that we just reviewed, try to continue that routine throughout the holidays. And if you might be utilizing these skills for the first time, take some time to practice them and ensure that this is separate from those challenging times that you may encounter. And doing this can help create a form of muscle memory so that when you are finding yourself in stressful situations, it's easier to draw upon those. Also, assessing your expectations. What are your expectations for the holidays? Are your thoughts about how you should feel playing out, or how you should see the holidays playing out, are they reasonable? Are there ways that you could integrate more time for self-care? Also, planning ahead in case you're caught off guard in a situation where you might experience a flood of emotions come on. And lastly is focusing on what is within our control. These things are our thoughts, our actions, and our speech. And when combined with planning ahead, gives you a sense of strength and power to be able to handle stressful situations. And lastly, to share some final thoughts with you, is there's no right way to feel around the holidays. Give yourself permission to be curious about your feelings in a way that doesn't cast judgment on yourself. It's okay to prioritize your physical and emotional health. And lastly, take it one day at a time. Try to focus on the present moment and pace yourself throughout the upcoming days and weeks. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And now I'm excited to shift to Stephanie's presentation.
Hi, everyone. Kim, thank you so much for introducing me, inviting me to speak about art therapy as a way to cope during the holidays. And pull up my screen. All right. I'm so excited to be invited to give this presentation today. I'm a huge advocate for art therapy and using the creative arts as ways to heal during difficult times. And so I hope there are parts of this presentation that you can take with you today and potentially use during the holiday season if it brings on extra stress, as it does for a lot of people. So as Kim stated, my name is Stephanie Clark. I am the Senior Clinical Art Therapist at the Road Home program at Rush. I'm not going to speak too much about that, but as Kim stated, we are a mental health clinic specifically to treat veterans and their loved ones located within the Department of Psychiatry at Rush University Medical Center. And what I will be sharing with you today is on the agenda here. First, we're going to talk about why making art is good for your brain, a little bit about what art therapy is, and some tips for how to start an art habit with ideas for specific art activities you can try at home and some suggestions for basic supplies. So first, I'm actually going to introduce some ideas from this NPR article that I found a couple of years ago. The article is titled "Feeling Artsy, Here's How Making Art Helps Your Brain." And this article came out and it just described everything that art therapists know. They actually interviewed art therapists for this article. And so I thought there were some wonderful points that art therapists know that we can share with the general population. And so if you want to go and read the article yourself, again, you can find that on the NPR website, and it's titled "Feeling Artsy, Here's How Making Art Helps Your Brain." So one of the reasons why art making can be so helpful and so healing is that it helps you imagine a more hopeful future. The article states that art's ability to flex our imaginations may be one of the reasons we've been making art since we were cave dwellers. So if you think of art making as a series of critical decision making, problem solving steps, and imagination, it might change the way you think about art making or look at art and realize how helpful it can be for humans as we evolve and grow and change through time. And a part of that reason is because it does require us to see what is not there. And the more you engage in that practice, the more active your imagination can be to imagine different life scenarios. And the way that can translate into your everyday life is that potentially if you're feeling stuck in a certain way of seeing things or believing in things, whereas you are practicing these creative problem solving, art making activities or other ways to engage your imagination, then that might translate into you having the ability in your everyday life to be more imaginative and to see different possibilities for your life and for your future. The next point the article makes is that it activates the reward center of our brain. Engaging in any sort of visual expression results in the reward pathway in the brain being activated, which means you feel good and it's perceived as a pleasurable experience. So what is really great about research today on the creative arts and how they affect our brain is that they're able to use brain imaging that we didn't have access to years prior, so like fMRI scans, to see what happens in the brain when we are engaging in art activities. And so we do have evidence to show that when we are engaging in art making, and I believe this probably translates to other forms of art as well, that those areas in the brain that perceive pleasure are activated. And so it does feel good. And I think truly this is one reason why people enjoy art therapy so much, is that you can be processing something very difficult through art making, but at the same time, the act of art making is activating those reward centers in our brain. So it kind of neutralizes that discomfort when you're processing something difficult. And I see that time and time again. Here are some additional points on how art making helps your brain. It lets you focus deeply. Some of you might have heard of what is called the flow state. So making art should induce what scientific community calls flow, the wonderful thing that happens when you're in the zone. It's the sense of losing yourself, losing all awareness. You're so in the moment and fully present that you forget all sense of time and space. And when you are in that flow state, nothing else seems to matter. All of your worries have melted away. You are so focused on your creative expression and the sensory experience of whatever you're doing that is creative, that it really affects you in a profound way. There are a lot of artists who talk about finding the flow state, and there's a lot more research that's being done on what exactly this looks like in the brain now. But what we do know is that like focusing deeply and having a meditative and mindful state of being can be really helpful in reducing stress and increasing your overall well-being. And then that leads to the last point here, it lowers stress. Although the research in the field of art therapy is emerging, there's evidence that making art can lower stress and anxiety. And this research is being done in the field currently, where they're doing pre and post scans and collecting a lot of biological information, testing cortisol levels and whatnot. But after art making, before art making, and after art making, and there is some evidence to show that people feel less stressed after the art making. So why not give it a chance, right? So now we'll transition a little bit into art therapy, since that is what I do and what I strongly believe in. And just to give you a little bit of awareness of art therapy as a field and a profession, in case it's something that you have maybe heard of before or haven't heard of, then you'll walk away with this presentation knowing a little bit more about what art therapy is too. Just a couple of slides on this, because I know you would like to hear some more specific examples of how you can use art to help cope with stress. So this is the definition defined by the American Art Therapy Association. Art therapy is a field that is regulated by a national association. There's also a national credentials board, and sets forth good practice and overall supports research and general definitions of the field. So the American Art Therapy Association says that art therapy is an integrative mental health and human service profession that enriches the lives of individuals, families, communities through active art making, creative processes, applied psychological theory, and human experience within a psychotherapeutic relationship. Art therapy, facilitated by a professional art therapist, effectively supports professional and relational treatment goals, as well as community concerns. Art therapy is used to improve cognitive and sensoriomotor functions, foster self-esteem and self-awareness, cultivate emotional resilience, promote insight, enhance social skills, reduce and resolve conflicts and distress, and advance societal and ecological change. I will say, as an art therapist, I started in the field knowing this and believing this, and through my experience introducing art making as a tool for healing, it's only further solidified my belief in this idea that using art, using a non-verbal form of therapy, can be really helpful to a lot of individuals. Art therapists are master's level clinicians, just like clinical counselors and clinical social workers, licensed marriage and family therapists. They work across a broad spectrum of practice in schools and hospitals and care facilities. Anywhere you would find a counselor or a social worker, art therapists work as well with diverse populations. And so it's a very similar profession and field as counseling and social work, with that added idea of integrating art into the healing modality. And I just wanted to leave you with this thought that is also from the American Art Therapy Association, that talks about how and why art therapy might work. Through integrative methods, art therapy engages the mind, body, and spirit in ways that are distinct from verbal articulation alone. Kinesthetic, sensory, perceptual, and symbolic opportunities invite alternative modes of receptive and expressive communication, which can circumvent the limitations of language. Visual and symbolic expression give voice to experience and empowers individual, communal, and societal transformation. And I know that's a very wordy definition, but what I gather from that statement is the idea that this type of therapy and art making engages not only your mind, but your body and your spirit as well. And so instead of sitting down and talking to someone about your problems, which is also very helpful, what you're doing is you're engaging maybe both sides of your body. You might be standing up, sitting down. You're activating different areas of the brain that you aren't activating through verbal communication. And then the verbal communication is added in there too. So it's a very holistic way of processing an experience that you might not otherwise have. And I do believe someday we'll have the technology that will show us what exactly is going on in the brain when art therapy is happening. But there's something really special that is happening there that is integrating experiences and helping people approach and see themselves in ways they wouldn't otherwise see themselves if there wasn't the art making there. And so now I've told you all about art therapy, and I hope you look more into it and tell your friends and family members about the potential healing aspects of art therapy. I want to give you some pretty solid tips for starting your own art habit that does not require an art therapist. So art can be really therapeutic without an art therapist as well. And these are tips specifically for you to start your own journey at home. Again, I'm going to give credit to NPR and their program called Life Kit because they did a second article about the healing aspects of art making. And this one is called Making Art is Good for Your Health. Here's how to start an art habit. So I'm stealing all of that information directly from them because it's just pretty solid information. So the first step, you don't need to be an artist with a capital A. Everyone's capable of creative expression. Research has shown that there are no differences in health outcomes between those who identify as experienced artists and those who don't. And I see this every day as well in the work I'm doing. There's this preconceived idea that people come into art therapy with that I'm not an artist, so I'm not going to get anything out of this. And that is because somewhere along the line, probably in art education and school or through society, we have developed this idea where we have to be good at something to benefit from it. And so a lot of people stop drawing, they start making art in about the teenage years when they start to really concern themselves with what other people think. And then they identify themselves as a non-artist. Whereas I truly believe, and a lot of people in the field believe, everyone is capable of creative expression, and you don't have to be good at it to reap the benefits. And I like to drill this point home when I'm working with people and say, you know, the it's about the process, not the product. That's what we say as art therapists. And when you're done with the artwork, the purpose was to make it, and so you can do whatever you want when you're finished with it. You can throw it away. I work with veterans, so I say, you know, you can bury it, you can blow it up, you can take it home and shoot it on the shooting range, because that can be a part of the process as well too. Because the point is to engage in creative problem solving, self-expression, that sensory experience, put how you're feeling into a visual form, and then whatever that form takes, whatever you end up with, that's not as important as the process. And so no art skill required to reap the benefits of art making. And the second step is figure out your mode of creative expression. Anything that engages your creative mind, you can do that through a myriad of activities. Finger painting, cooking, baking. I consider cooking and baking very creative endeavors as well. For a while, when I was a little bit burnt out on art making, I was doing it as my profession, and my work was getting really stressful, and I just couldn't bring myself to make art. I actually started cooking a lot, and that was my therapy away from art therapy. And so anything where you're engaging your senses and you're bringing things together and you're problem solving can be a creative endeavor. So baking, collaging, painting, weaving, maybe knitting, crocheting, writing screenplays, scrapbooking, dancing, I'll add. The sky's the limit. And so there's no one way to engage in the creative process. Whatever feels good to you, feels right to you, is the right choice. The next step is focus on the making and let go of expectations. This is really, really hard for people who their last interaction with art was potentially in middle school art class, where you had been given a rubric by your art teacher and you had to learn 3-point perspective, and it had to include all of these things or you weren't going to get an A. And as an art therapist, what I'm asking people to do is to let go and unlearn what you were taught about art having to be in a certain way, and think of it as play. I think as adults, we kind of move away from play. We think play is for children, when really play is creativity and it's imagination, and it's fun, and it's for our health and well-being. So mess around, let yourself get lost in the process, and just play. You don't even have to complete the project or like what you're making to feel the health benefits. Next, think about making art like any healthy habit, such as eating well or exercising. Just as you make time to work, exercise, hang out with family and friends, you should make time for your artistic endeavors. Try to designate a special time in your week to devote to your practice. And I will be honest and say that this is a very important step that I've integrated into my self-care routine. Even as an art therapist, I can tend to get very busy with life and think, oh, I don't have time for that. And it's just like exercise. I can tell myself I don't have time, but it's really a matter of working it into my schedule and valuing it as for my health and well-being, and making the time for it. Because really, we can say we don't have time for a lot of things that are good for us, but really dedicating yourself and committing to the act and planning it into your schedule is what is going to be helpful. So I have to do that even though I love making art. Sometimes my schedule gets away from me. And the next thing to remember is ride those waves of emotion. The more you're able to make art a regular habit, the more you're likely to get this great reward, this wonderful thing that happens when you're in the zone. And this is true. This is something I've discovered through my own art making process and from seeing others. The more you're able to just play and engage and not worry about what it looks like, the more fun you're going to have, because you're not going to have those thoughts of, it doesn't look a certain way, it's ugly, it should be this, it should be that. When you can practice engaging in something, when you're letting go of those expectations, it's just a beautiful, creative, imaginative space to be in, for time a day, time per week, even time per month. I should have put this in the slide, but a book that I've been reading is called Your Brain on Art, and it's about about neuroaesthetics, and so the science behind making art and engaging with art. And the authors of this book have stated that even 15 minutes a month of a creative endeavor can increase your health and well-being and lower stress. And then get yourself in the mood is the last step here. Some days you won't feel like making art, and that's okay. If you're too anxious to draw, address the anxiety. Go take a walk, stand up from the couch, go for a run, or see a person. And so it's important to schedule it in and commit, but also important to listen to your body. And if you've got it on your schedule that day and it really isn't feeling right, don't force it, because then you're not going to benefit from it. So now you have the steps to start your own art habit. What kind of art should you try? Some types of art appeal to yield greater health benefits than others. Clay tends to be a really engaging art medium. The article states it engages both your hands and many parts of your brain and the sensory experience. It's got a smell, it's got a way that you can manipulate it with both of your hands. And can be a very therapeutic tool. And you don't need to join an art studio or buy clay that you can fire in a kiln. There's a lot of really nice quality air dry clays or modeling clays that you can use that just need the air to dry, and you can even paint them afterwards. Using clay also, I mean, depending on what your intention is with the art material, it might not even be something that you keep, or you might smush it back together and put it back in the tub to make something else the next day. That's the beauty of the modeling clay, is you can manipulate it and then put it back and reuse it another day. A number of studies have shown that coloring inside a shape, specifically a pre-drawn geometric mandala design, so a circle, is more effective in boosting mood than coloring on a blank paper or even coloring inside a square shape. This is something that's always fascinated me. We learned this when I was going to school for art therapy, that if you give somebody a blank sheet of paper, a rectangular piece of paper, that is very intimidating. But somehow, if you draw a circle on that paper, it's less intimidating, and has specific mood boosting effects. And so if you have an adult coloring book with mandalas, how great. If you don't have that, even taking a piece of copy paper or notebook paper and drawing a circle and starting to color or do patterns inside of there can be really helpful. And then the last thing to remember, there's no one medium or art activity that's better than another. Some days you want to go home and paint, others you might want to sketch. Do what's most beneficial to you at any given time. Personally, I engage in a lot of different art activities, and I usually have 20 projects going on at one time because my mood changes day to day on what kind of sensory experience I want to have. And so I don't start something and then have to finish it before I start something else. I'm really just feeling what I need that day, and I engage with that material. When should you see an art therapist? So all of this information is to show you how you can engage in a healthy art practice on your own at home. You don't need an art therapist, but it is important to note that if you are going through a serious mental health concern and having a large amount of distress, it is important for you to seek the guidance of a professional art therapist or therapist, any kind of professional mental health specialist. However, if you're making art to connect with your own creativity and to decrease anxiety and hone your coping skills, then by all means, figure out how to allow yourself to do that. Just let the lines, shapes, colors translate your emotional experience into something visual. Use the feelings that you feel in your body, your memories, because words often don't get it. And now I'm going to introduce some ideas that you can try on your own. But first, I want to discuss a little bit this idea of art as therapy versus art therapy. And so there are two concepts in art therapy where art as therapy means that just engaging in any kind of creative activity is therapeutic in itself, and you receive benefits from that. And so it doesn't have to be specifically related to how you're feeling that day or a mental health goal. For example, you could be coloring in an adult coloring book, a mandala, just playing with clay without much intention. That is art as therapy. And so any activity you can engage in where the sole purpose is just to engage in the senses and to maybe distract yourself from your stress a little bit, that is art as therapy. Art therapy is the idea when you're making art to specifically sit with and experience and process difficult emotions or memories or experiences. And I'll give you a couple examples of that as well. But I wanted to introduce the idea that there's kind of two ways you can go about this. You can start with some activities just to kind of dip your toe into art making and see how that makes you feel, like knitting or crocheting. And then if you are seeing the benefits and you want to take it a step further and create art that directly relates to what you're feeling, or you have a specific intention to explore, then that can be helpful as well. So here are some ideas for art as therapy. So just the act of creating can reduce stress and increase your sense of accomplishment, self-esteem, self-efficacy, and well-being. Adult coloring books. These were really popular a few years ago. In the art therapy world, we kind of had to do a lot of correcting the public on the idea of what they are, because a lot of these books were being called art therapy books, and art therapy as we know it is what is done with an art therapist. So coloring in a coloring book can be really therapeutic. It's not art therapy, but it's a wonderful coping skill to use when you're feeling stressed and you need to kind of zone out and focus on colors and patterns and shapes. And again, that idea of the mandala. So you might have a mandala coloring book, or you might have a journal where you draw a circle on every page, and maybe it's your daily mandala journal, or you have a sheet of paper where you draw a circle and fill in the circle, and that is you working on a mandala. I also think that learning to knit, crochet, or cross stitch can be really therapeutic. A lot of people do this as a way to engage their hands. And so if you're someone who is a little higher anxiety and fidgets a little bit, it's hard for you to sit still. Knitting or crocheting can be a really great way to engage your hands in an activity. There's also that sensory component of choosing the color and the fabric of the yarn, and then some decision making and what you're going to make. Are you going to make a scarf or a hat or a sock or a blanket? And so that can be a really nice way to dip your toe into art making as well. Experimenting with watercolors. Maybe you have kids or grandkids and you have like those old watercolor palettes around. Well, watercolors can be a really calming activity, and I do this even with my coworkers when they're feeling stressed in the office, is get out a palette of watercolors and just put colors on the page. And you can see the example of the watercolor on the slide here. It's just colors in no specific order. It's not trying to be anything. It just is color added to the page. And so adding color to a page can be really therapeutic. Then you can experiment a little with the wet on wet technique, wet on dry, meaning do you dip your paper in the water first, or do you add the wet paint on the dry paper? Sprinkle of salt, because salt can absorb water, and so that can make a cool texture on the paper. So this is a wonderful example of play and playing with the materials and seeing what happens. Again, cooking a meal or baking a treat using a recipe. How nice to even have a recipe to follow. If you're just really needing something to do and feel that sense of accomplishment, having a set plan and a recipe to follow can really aid in that sense of accomplishment. Paint by numbers. Paint by numbers are great. Actually, this image of the person on the sidewalk with the trees kind of walking down the street is a paint by number. They're very advanced these days, and they make them for adults, and sometimes you can't even tell it was a paint by number, and how good the artist feels when you have finished the piece and you're like, wow, I created that. By all means, cheat and do a paint by number and feel good about that. I think those are great. And then I say diamond paintings. A few years ago, I worked with quite a few people who were very active in doing the diamond paintings, and those were similar to the paint by number, where you put the little jewels on the pre-designed design, like a paint by number. Holiday crafts, and so making a wreath or holiday ornaments, or maybe making decorations with your grandkids could be a really fun way to engage in an art activity. I also know a lot of adults who love to build 3D puzzles, and these are really neat as well. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes. You can make different animals. Someone I worked with made a clock, a really beautiful clock, and it actually had a clock in it. And so it comes in a flat sheet, and you build the 3D puzzle, and it's made out of wood, and then you can paint it. And again, just feeling that I made that, I feel a sense of accomplishment, feeling proud, really boosts your self-esteem. So now we'll get into some ideas if you want to engage in art and focus a little bit more on your emotions or something difficult you've experienced or are experiencing. One of those ideas is to just draw, paint, or use clay to represent your current emotion or range of motions. And in the photo here, you can see actually a mandala, a circle, and the person has divided it into a pie. And in each pie is a different emotion. And she has just used markers to abstractly draw what that emotion feels like. And if you haven't engaged in art for a while, that might sound really abstract. But if you think about it, think of a time when you were feeling a really intense emotion or overwhelmed, and you just didn't have words to express what that felt like. In some ways, our language is limiting. I think as humans, we have so many more experiences than we have words for, and that is when the art comes in and can be a really helpful tool. I don't have a word for it, but this is how I feel. Creating a safe space is a good one. So as I introduced this art therapy intervention to people by saying, close your eyes and imagine yourself in a safe, calm, and welcoming environment. And you just take a moment to create that space. Maybe it's in a forest or on a beach or your childhood home. And then use magazine images, photos, or drawing materials to create that space you imagined. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, perhaps with holiday stress, you can take a moment to pull that picture out, or maybe you hang it on a wall somewhere at home. You just take a moment and look at it and take some deep breaths and imagine you're there. And really, it does really work. It helps you imagine yourself in that safe space, and it's kind of a little bit of a reset. Kim actually mentioned this in a different way earlier, but focusing on what you can control. A lot of times our anxiety is caused because we are so focused on the things in our lives that are out of our control. And so this is a very common art therapy technique where you can fold a piece of paper in half or use both sides of it. And then on one side, it's things I can control, and on the other, things I can't control. And then seeing those things might help you realize, oh, I've been focusing on the side of things I can't control, and that's why I'm feeling so anxious. So I'm going to focus more on what I do have control over, and that can really alleviate anxiety. And this is my last art therapy suggestion. The idea of the container is a really big idea in art therapy, and I use it a lot for my own personal health and well-being and with the clients that I work with. And we make a lot of boxes, and this can be interpreted differently depending on what you're going through. So some common ways to use the box or the container is either as a worry box. If you're someone who is experiencing a lot of anxiety and worry, then you make a box and you put all of your worries in there when you experience them. And so it's the act of, I'm going to write my worry down, I'm going to put it in the box, and then I don't have to ruminate on it or think about it over and over again. I'm going to leave it in that box for later. Or a memory box or a grief box. And so perhaps during the holidays, you are missing a loved one who has passed on, and you want to honor them, as Kim said as well. I think actually talking about those feelings and honoring that person can be really helpful. And so I'm making a box dedicated to that person. And so this process can be just finding a box or a container. It can be an old shoe box. We use a lot of cigar boxes in the art therapy room. You can often find those at a cigar shop or at Benny's. You can buy them for $1 and they're really great. Or a box from a craft store or a plastic container, and then decorate the box in however you see fit. Maybe you choose collage images from magazines or you paint it. Here's a picture of somebody's worry box, and the artist said, let your worries float off into space, and put some stickers of space on there. And then decide on your intention. Is this my worry box? Is this my memory box? Is this a grief box? What do you want to hold in the box? Meaning, what do you want to set aside for another time, to kind of pull that box out when the time is appropriate so that you can do the things you need to do in the moment. And now I want to give you some ideas for basic supplies. And I want to bring home that you can make art out of anything, literally anything. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, this is all great, but I haven't purchased art supplies since my kids were in grade school, 30, 40 years ago, you no need to worry. Really, any kind of paper will do. If you have copy paper at home, recycled mail, old books. But I will say you can make art out of anything. And at the same time, purchasing a couple of nice art supplies for yourself does really make a difference. And so copy paper can be really helpful if you don't have anything else to draw a mandala on. But if that's something that you are really getting into and really finding the benefit from, I would go to a craft store and buy a nice sketchbook, because the texture is a little bit different and you will really notice the difference. Oil and chalk pastels are a really nice basic supply to have around. Air dry clay or modeling clay. Lots of different types of this, from Crayola to some nicer end air dry clays that you might get at Blick, which is a nicer art supply store that I'll talk about in a second. Colored pencils. And colored pencils, I will give you a tip. I have a picture here of Prismacolor because I call these the Cadillac of colored pencils. If you used Crayola colored pencils before and you weren't a fan of colored pencils, that's because you didn't have a really awesome, high quality, nice colored pencil like these Prismacolors. So maybe give them another chance. They're a great tool for especially coloring in a coloring book. Markers, any kind of markers, but again, some nice quality art markers are you can tell the difference between those and Crayola, but Crayola markers work well too. All-purpose craft glue, glue stick, Mod Podge, that's the stuff that's really great for collage. It's a sealer and an adhesive. Any kind of paint, but acrylic paint works really well for adults. It is permanent, and so you want to be careful and not let it get on your clothes or your furniture or anything. And a variety of brushes, masking tape, and then my favorite is recycled materials. I love working with cardboard, paper towel tubes, magazines, newspaper. I love all of the packing material that comes when I order packages online because it comes in like different textures, and I love that stuff. So I save it and I make a lot of art out of recycled materials. And then, again, to remind you, anything can be used to make art. When I was doing virtual art therapy, I would have people walk around their house and we'd go through each room in their house and just contemplate what in that room could be used as an art material. So for example, going to the kitchen, foil is a really great art material. You can mold it and make sculpture out of it. You can use it in a lot of different ways. Saran wrap, similarly. You can go to your office supplies and use paper clips to make connections with things, cotton balls on a collage, old calendars and magazines and greeting cards to cut the images out. You really don't need traditional art materials to make art. And then similarly, if you want to buy a pre-made kit, like a paint by number or something like that, that is really okay too. You don't have to go to the art store and buy all of these fancy materials. Whatever feels right to you is good. So wanted to share a couple resources, the American Art Therapy Association, and then just to remind you, if you were interested in the information I shared, that article, Feeling Artsy, Here's How Making Art Helps Your Brain, is also on the NPR website. Making Art is Good for Your Health. Here's How to Start an Art Habit, or here's how to start an art habit. And then a couple of my favorite art supply stores located in Chicago and online are Michael's. You've probably seen Michael's or been to one. Michael's, and then Blick. So Blick stores, there is one in Lincoln Park, and then a couple in the suburbs, but they also have a website as well. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I really hope I've inspired you to go home and make some art.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I know I feel inspired just
Good.
listening to everything that you were sharing, and all the reminders too of, feeling like, I kind of left some of my creativity back in grade school, but can dust that off a bit and still, enjoy creative expression. So yeah, thank you so much. And just that reminder that, everyone is capable of creative expression, and
Yes.
And not to put too much judgment on ourselves when we're trying to engage in that.
Absolutely. And it's true, they say doctors are the worst patients. Sometimes artists are the worst art therapy clients because they are trained and they get really hung up on the, the qualities of art, when really art therapy is about expressing yourself and having fun. So
Sure. Yeah, that's too funny. I know, like the educator, whatever, the expert in this, can even struggle with that process too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, great. Well, at this time, we will open the floor up to questions for Stephanie as well as myself. The callers that have called into the Zoom meeting, feel free to unmute yourself by pressing *6. And we would love to answer your questions. And then for those who are watching on YouTube, please please enter any questions or just discussion points in the chat box, and we will get to those in a minute. Let's see. I know that there was one question that came up, and that is, sometimes it can feel like art projects can take a longer amount of time than we may have. Like we may, create that in our mind a little bit. Is there like, a particular kind of habit, like routine or amount of time that it's recommended to engage in art making?
No, there's really not. I will just reference again the book that I'm reading called Your Brain on Art, where they have done research and cited research that says even 15 minutes a week or even 15 minutes a month, you can receive benefits from that. And so there is no minimum amount required. Really, any amount of time you can dedicate can be helpful.
Yeah, that sounds really manageable.
Right? Totally doable.
15 minutes a month. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's great and good to know. And we'll share that book resource that you mentioned, as well as the articles, as kind of a follow up to this lecture and especially your presentation. And another question that I saw come up was, is going someplace like to an art museum or somewhere that art is featured, or even walking around our city too and seeing the architecture, is that a way that we can engage in some kind of therapeutic way with? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, and this is something that's newer in the research, and the book discusses this too, Your Brain on Art, the difference between engaging in the art yourself and then being an observer. There are definitely benefits of being an observer and an appreciator of art, but you have to really engage with the art. And so there's a statistic that when you go to a museum, people spend an average of like 3 seconds per art piece or item. And so walking through like the Chicago Art Institute is not going to potentially benefit you that way. But if you go with an intention to sit with an art piece, really look at it, spend time with it, engage with it. How do you feel when you look at it? What was the artist's intention? That definitely can lead to some benefits of being an observer and not a participant. Yeah. And the same is with nature, really anything that you're present with and fully open and thinking about how it makes you feel can be beneficial.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's really cool to hear that is being studied, and what kind of questions that we can think about or contemplate, that can kind of facilitate more of that therapeutic experience.
Yeah.
And probably going to the Art Institute or somewhere like that on the off hours, not
right.
crowds there. Yeah.
Exactly. When you can actually spend time in front of an art piece. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. And another question that I saw come up was, if someone's interested in pursuing art therapy, is there a particular way that they could find somebody that offers that?
The best place to go would be arttherapy.org, and that's the American Art Therapy Association's website. And there is a section on their website all that highlights education and the universities that offer art therapy. And so, sorry, was that if you wanted to be an art therapist or if you wanted to find an art therapist?
Oh, to find an art
Oh, to
therapist?
find an art therapist. Okay. So same answer, but different part of the website. And so on the Art Therapy Association's website, there's a art therapist locator, and it's an interactive map. And so you can click on Chicago and zoom in to even neighborhoods, and then find the art therapist and potentially what services they offer, and start that way. It's a really good tool that they implemented a few years ago.
Okay, yeah, that's really great to know. And yeah, a resource that I wasn't even familiar with. I wouldn't have even known where to point people if they were interested in art therapy. So
And that will ensure you are finding an art therapist who has the proper education and credentialing, because in some states there is not title protection, and Illinois is one of them. So anyone really can call themselves an art therapist. And so you want to either go to the Art Therapy Association's website, or go to the Art Therapy Credentials Board website and look up that person's name to make sure that they have the right credentials.
yeah, that's really helpful to know, especially when you're talking about, actually being credentialed, and know you're receiving the type of quality services that you were
Yes.
talking about during your presentation.
Yes.
And one last question that came up was, can you tell us a little bit more about your work at Rush?
Oh, sure. I could talk all day about this. So, what we really specialize in our clinic is PTSD treatment for combat trauma and military sexual trauma. And the way we do that is through our intensive outpatient program, or our IOP. And this is and if you know any veterans, please spread the word, because our program is largely funded by the Wounded Warrior Project. And veterans can come to our program from all over the country, basically all over the world, as long as you were in the U.S. military, for free, and receive 2 weeks of PTSD treatment. You get housing and 3 meals a day. And it's very intense. And so they receive individual therapy, that's a cognitive-based therapy, art therapy, and emotion and communication skills groups, and other kind of therapies. It's a very holistic treatment program. And so again, that's any veteran who was in the U.S. military. They don't have to have been honorably discharged. So that's one difference between us and the VA. To receive VA benefits, you have to have that honorable discharge. Well, you don't at Road Home. And so you can qualify for services, and we'll fly you in to receive that treatment. And we also have an outpatient program. So we work with local veterans who are experiencing PTSD, but the local veterans also, whatever they've got going on. So anxiety, depression, and things of that nature. And so I mostly do art therapy for the IOP and for the outpatient program. And one other exciting thing that I've taken on is our traveling art exhibit. And so I have so many wonderful examples of art therapy from our IOP that people just need to see, that we've gotten 50 pieces cased and have been doing a traveling exhibit to show people what PTSD looks like, really, and to bring awareness to veterans issues and art therapy in the Road Home program. And so we're getting the word out in that way as well. And the pieces are very intense, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people being able to engage with those. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie.
Yeah.
With in regards to the Road Home program, is that just at our downtown Rush campus?
Yes, we are located in in an office building north of the hospital. So it's not in the hospital, it's a separate building. And that is so it's easier to access, and it's not, people can walk into our building without feeling like people are seeing them walking into a treatment program. And so we don't have big rush signs or anything like that there. But we do virtual therapy for local folks in Illinois. And then for the IOP, we bring people in for that program to do in person. So yeah. And it's all free. It's all free.
Yeah, and that's cool to know about, a virtual option too, in case, transportation is some kind of barrier. So that's good to hear. And is this open to veterans of all ages?
Yes, veterans of all eras and ages. We primarily work with post 9/11, but we still occasionally get Vietnam era vets and veterans from the 90s coming through. Trauma is interesting in that you can avoid it for a long time, and then when you stop to slow down, it creeps up. And so we sometimes still see Vietnam veterans who have finally slowed down and have realized that the trauma they've experienced is getting in the way of their lives. So we still see a lot of older vets as well.
Yeah. Okay. That's great to hear, especially for, or our audience who might be older than, like you're saying, the 9/11, military. So, yeah. Well, great. I don't see any other questions, so I'll continue to move forward. But if anybody has anything else to contribute, we're more than happy to answer that. And just for the last couple minutes of our time together, I want to review the upcoming lecture that we have that will be in the new year in 2024. It's crazy to think that that is just around the corner. So on June 3rd, or I'm sorry, on January 3rd, we will have our annual What Matters in the New Year lecture. And this is going to be offered in partnership with our Shaman Senior Voices program that focuses on hearing from older adults what matters most to them. So we would love to have you join us in 2 weeks for that lecture. And if you have any questions at all about today's presentation, or if you're interested in hearing more about Rush Generation's programs, specifically, one thing that came to mind from Stephanie's presentation was that Rush Generations offers an annual class called Art for Emotional Wellness, and that will be offered this spring from March 12th to April 16th, and there is no fee to join that. So if you're feeling, inspired and want to have a group setting for doing some art therapy, we'd love to have you join us. And you can call our 800 number, 1-800-757-0202 if you'd like to get more information about that. And lastly, just want to send you warm wishes this holiday season from Rush Generations. We really hope that this time and the information that was shared today will help equip you to get through the holidays, whatever they may look like to you this year. So want to extend that to you, and great appreciation for Stephanie Clark for joining us. She, just did such an amazing job giving us wonderful information on specifically art and how we can utilize that for coping with the holidays. So until we see you in 2024, I hope everyone stays well and has